We share this morning John's telling of that first Easter morning. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and she went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and she said to them, "They have taken my Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." So then Peter and the other disciples set out, and they went toward the tomb. And the two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down to look in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came following him and went into the tomb, and he saw the linen cloth that had been on Jesus' head. It was not lying with the linen wrappings, but it was rolled up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple, who reached the tomb first, also went in, and he saw and he believed, for as yet they did not understand the scripture, that Jesus must rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to their homes. But Mary stood weeping outside of the tomb, and as she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. And they said to her, Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." And when she said this, she turned around, and she saw Jesus standing there, but she didn't know that it was Jesus. And Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." And Jesus said to her, "Mary." And she turned and she said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. And Jesus said to her, "Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and to your Father, to my God and to your God." And Mary Magdalene, she went, and she told the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. May God add a blessing to the reading of this word. I tell you a true miracle. Years ago, in 2008 to be precise about it, the world experienced a financial crisis. Can you feel it in your bellies? Many of us in this room were affected. Homes and life savings were lost. People and organizations were devastated by the ways that money just seemed to disappear overnight. The recession hurt many people in ways from which they are still recovering. Recently, I heard a story from someone who deeply lived the intensity of that time. He lost a lot during that recession. The things that he thought defined who he was and gave him a sense of his own worth, things like money and prestige, those things seem to have disappeared with his money. Money in the bank, a sense of security, all of those things that he thought would take him into the future were lost. So he was brought into a place of despair and hopelessness, and he wondered if there would ever be a day again when he would feel safe again, when he would feel like himself again. And somehow, in the midst of that funk and that fear, he somehow found himself here in this church. He stayed quiet and in the background for a very long time. He took in the music, and he took in the message, and he took in the goodness of y'all and the ways that you greet each other as though you're each miracle. And he took all of those things in, and gradually, he began to notice that he was able to be more and more present to the world again. He began to rebuild his life. He focused on the things that he loved, actually, and he let go of all of the things that it turns out money really cannot buy. As he walked out of the tomb of despair into the sweetness of a new way of living, he told me that he doesn't feel like his old self again. In fact, he doesn't want to feel like his old self again. Instead, he feels like someone whose soul has been stretched and made bigger because he has found his way into new life. We have no idea who it is that sits next to us in the pew or stands behind us in line at the grocery store, or who it is we get angry with when we're driving. We have no idea the stories that people live. What we do know and what we proclaim in this morning and all mornings is this: that God's wild and wonderful world is a place in which we are called to pay attention to, as Pastor Katie said with the kids, and witness to the miracles in life, the ways that the most broken of us can find healing or be reminded of healing, even if we can't find it, the remembrance of it in our own souls. It turns out that we are everyday and Easter people. I could stop my sermon here, but I'm not going to. So you just heard the story of the first Easter morning, right? Jesus, who was nailed to a cross on Friday and laid in the tomb and stoppered up, is not where his disciples expect to find him. Mary and the women go to that tomb on that long ago Easter, and they are so heartbroken, broken, and devastated that they don't know what to do with themselves. So they find themselves where the body of their beloved Jesus lies, and they see when they arrive there something that magnifies an already intense and overwhelming grief. They see what looks like a grave that has been desecrated. So into the midst of the so much grief, it seems that they have more stirred in. So summoning courage that I don't think I could find, Mary Magdalene summons the will to look into the place of her deepest fears, and she sees there something that confuses her broken heart so much, because she doesn't see Jesus where she expects to see him. Jesus is not in that cold tomb. He is in the place where Mary is, where Mary and her grief are. Jesus is in that place, and through calling her by her name, did you catch that? He calls her by her name. That's how intimately he loves. He tells her to go and to share the good news that nothing can stop the love of God. Nothing, nothing, nothing. And so Mary goes. She says to the unbelieving disciples, "I have seen the Lord." And she has to say it over and over and over again before they believe her. So Mary experiences astounding life shift. And then she doesn't keep it to herself. She goes out and she shares the story with others. So here's the thing. When we experience transformation, maybe you've experienced transformation in your life. Anybody out here experienced transformation in your life? Thank God. When we experience transformation, we have to tell about it. Because if we keep that to ourselves, we are keeping the richness of God's gifting and God's presence and good news to ourselves. And hope shared is a contagious and glorious thing. Do you know the last step of the 12-step movement? Here's how it goes. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to others who are struggling with addiction and despair, and to practice the healing of the 12-step principles in all of our affairs. Do you hear how that movement knows how important it is to tell the good news? I don't know if you saw the article about in yesterday's paper, I think it was, the Gallup thing that said that churches are continuing to shrink. You know why they're shrinking? Because we aren't telling the good news. 12-step groups understand that we have to share transformation in order for other people to understand that transformation is possible. We are good news telling people. We have to share it. So I have one quick little story for you. And of course, because it's Easter, it's from Anne Lamott, who is one of my favorite preachers. She's not really a preacher. Anybody read Anne Lamott? Thank you. If you haven't, she's delicious. She speaks in her book, Small Victories, of how it is that she learned when she was very young to stuff all of the unpleasant things away from human or anybody else's sight. So maybe you learn too what it means to be a good girl or a good boy. Means you're not angry, means you don't feel vengeful, means you don't feel jealousy. Anybody here without any of those feelings? Not me, but we're so often taught how to stuff them down instead of learn how to make gold out of those hard feelings. Anyway, Anne Lamott is no exception. She learned how to keep those things out of sight and how to make it look like she has it all together. Anybody else try to do that too? We all do. Maybe it's a good thing, I don't know. But then Anne Lamott says this. She says, in my 30s, my system crashed. I got sober because I had been going crazy. A few women in my community reached out to me. They recognized me as a frightened lush. I told them about my most vile behavior, and they said, me too. I told them about crimes against the innocent, especially myself. And they said, ditto, yay, welcome. I could not seem to get them to reject me, says Anne Lamott. It was a nightmare. And it was my salvation. Here's the thing, if you hear nothing else this morning, resurrection is messy. Rising a new life is messy, and it requires vulnerability, and it requires courage to rise again. Resurrection may feel like a nightmare. It had to have been nightmarish for Mary to encounter Jesus in that long ago garden. Her grief had her so fully bound, she couldn't even see miracle in front of her face. We know what that feels like, don't we? But moving into resurrection feels like moving out of nightmare, and resurrection feels like salvation. We are saved by despair because we don't have to fake perfection anymore. Resurrection looks like this. To be born again as a people looks like this city, Rochester, deciding that we will not allow homeless people to sleep in our skyways. There has to be a better way, right? So we come together. This is what new life looks like as a people of Jesus. We become committed to looking at the systems that create poverty in such a way and what needs to be done systemically here in the city of Rochester in order that all people have safer, warmer, drier homes. Resurrection and new life is concerned with the well-being of all of God's children. It is nonpartisan. It is all-inclusive. It is no-holds-barred contagious. Can you feel it? Play with me here. It's Easter. Are you hopeful? Do you long for a better world? That's what Easter is all about. I want to tell you about the man whose story I told earlier, the man who dragged himself into this church and found new life. He is here all the time in ways that proclaim God's grace, and he's here because he came to a place where hope is spoken. Resurrection is so good. It's got to be shared. Easter is no long ago story. We have seen the Lord, and the Lord knows our name. Who are we going to tell? Who are you going to tell? Everybody, good answer. Amen. Let's sing.